from my standpoint, I always get people coming to me like, hey, well, can I do this program or can I do this program? How do I qualify for that? And it's like, let's take a step back. What are you trying to do? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do with the property?
Welcome to the House Hacking Success Podcast, where you'll learn the path to free rent and financial freedom through real estate. Featuring your hosts, Brad Labrie and Drew Klingler.
What's up, everybody? It's your host, Bradley Labrie, and today I want to talk about the podcast sponsor, Rentometer. Whether you already have an established rental business or analyzing your first rental deal, you know that getting the rent right is crucial to lowering investment risk and optimizing your rental income. That's why the go-to source for rent data is Rentometer. Property investors and property managers rely on Rentometer because it is the fastest and easiest way to access quality rent data for addresses and neighborhoods anywhere in the United States. You can also research current local comps, trends, and property data. Don't take our word for it. Rentometer analyzes over 500,000 rents per month and gets rave reviews from customers. My property manager, myself, and my clients all use Rentometer anytime we are looking to purchase a new property to know exactly what we can get for our properties. Go to rentometer.com today to get your 7-day free trial and save up to 60%. Grow your rental business smarter with Rentometer.
What's up, everybody? Real quick before we start the show. If you go down to the description or the show notes for this podcast episode, there's a link, and that's going to send you to a page that you can download our free ebook on. This ebook is really good. Brad wrote it, and it covers everything that you need to know about house hacking in a very structured order so you can put all the pieces together. All right, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the show. Today we have Sam and Nick. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'm really thrilled to get into your story. You're in South Boston now. But let's kind of go back and start at the origin, sort of what drew you to real estate and then the dynamic in the relationship and who wanted to get into real estate initially.
Yeah, so I think it started for us. So we actually started dating when we were kids, basically. Sam was, I think, 15. I was like 16, 17. So we got together at a really young age, probably like towards the end of high school, early college. I sort of got the bug. To this day, I don't really know where or how, to be honest, but because no one in our family was doing it. I just started reading a ton, and at that time it was just, the Google searches. I didn't know about BiggerPockets or anything at that time, but just got really hooked on it. And I always kind of had a sort of entrepreneurial mind and all of that. And I think for me, I just wanted to sort of be able to create the life we wanted. I think we wanted to be really intentional about, what we did post-college. We loved the idea of, passive income and all that. So yeah, I think from that point, I was really into it. And then it was getting Sam on board.
Which is never easy.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because I think it's important. And I think it comes from a good place because I know, my wife, we had the advantage of me sort of being in real estate beforehand, but I know there's a dynamic there and it's an important dynamic. Let's talk a little about that. Like, what were some of the reservations at first, Sam? And how were you guys able to come together and overcome some of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think at first our situation was a little bit different, seeing as I was probably like 19 when he was trying to convince me that we should own buildings and, rent them out to tenants. And I was like, dude, we live in our parents' house. Like, I can't imagine being a landlord. I was like, what happens if I'm so like this in general, but my question to him was, well, what happens when something breaks? We're not going to be able to fix it. We don't know anything. So I think that was my first large reservation of we don't own a home. We have never even rented an apartment, besides in college, which didn't really count. So how are we going to be able to do this? And, Nick always thinks bigger picture of like, we're going to figure it out and then look at how great it's going to be. So it was a lot of long conversations, I think Nick said early on in our relationship. And then once he graduated and started his first job, we basically were talking like, at this point we had been together for a while, let's move in together. And I think the first step that got me into saying, okay, we're going to do this was when all of our friends started renting apartments and Nick was like, let's move into my parents' basement and save money. And I was like, all right, you know what? Fine. So that was like the first step of like, now I think I'm not fully on board, but I'm doing these things that are going to help me get to this end goal that I don't even know if I truly want. And then during that time, Nick gave me the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad to read and just begged me to read it. And that was really the catalyst. After that, I think that it's always helpful to have somebody else than your significant other to tell you why, open the world of possibilities that, good things can happen from this decision. And it was so hard for me, especially we'd grown up together. We had so many of the same views and thoughts. And he was just like, it's going to be great. And I was like, you said that about so many things. So reading that book totally changed my mindset. And then I was like, all right, we're in the basement. We're saving every dollar we make. Let's just do it. And that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. Funny story. On our second date, I took my wife to a Kiyosaki event. Kiyosaki wasn't there, but I gave her, I think it's Rich Woman, Kim Kiyosaki's Woman's Perspective on Rich Dad Poor Dad. Is that the title of the book?
I think so.
Right? Yeah, I think so. So I gave her on her second date, and she looked at me like, "All right, this guy's crazy."
Yeah,
and it was like an accounting course, and it was slightly odd, but it works. So let's talk about that. Let's dig into that because there is that dynamic that my wife, I think that's what got her on board too. She's like, this is a little crazy, but it gets us to our end goal. And I think that was really the thing that helped us and a lot of couples was like, all right, this is, and I love what Dave Ramsey, which is slightly different than maybe what our community focuses on, but he talks a lot about live like no one else so you can live and give like no one else down the road, right? And I think that metaphor was really, without saying in those words, how I was able to help convince my wife. Was that something similar for you, Sam, that like this big picture, down the road, like we can live this life that I want to live, that I know we probably aren't going to be able to live if we go down the traditional path?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think seeing our parents go down the traditional path, well, they did well in life for what they did. I was always saying to Nick, we want more. We want to be able to give back to them. And that's still our goal. Without having kids right now, they're our main priority until children come along. But absolutely. And I think I was, and Nick always says, the picture perfect employee, because I loved the idea of just like going into a company, staying there my whole life, working really, really hard for somebody else. And I think once I had that light bulb moment where like I can do this for myself and be just as successful as I ever dreamed, if not way more, it was like, okay, there's a world of possibilities that I just never let myself even think that exists.
So before we move into your story, because I want to get into that. I mean, I know you've done some six-figure renovations. I mean, things that people really aspire to do. You've done it. But real quick, Sam, like touch on now that you've gone through it, you have a little bit of wisdom of going through a few deals, like looking back at maybe a couple or partners that are just starting and there's some of the reservations. How do you speak to, those that are thinking about it, but they have the same reservations you had when you were 19?
Yeah, so I would say, doing it with any type of partner, whether it's your spouse or another partner, I'm huge into over communicating. And I think back to all those nights where we just like sit on the couch and talk about it. And I talk through like all these fake scenarios that I was nervous about, or all of these what ifs that I would think through. And Nick would just kind of talk me off the ledge every single time. And I'm that type A person that needed that. And then I think through that conversation and those like deep talks of these are my inner fears about going through this process, I was able to build a different kind of trust. It's not the same relationship trust that we always had and we had built our, our life on. It was this like business aspect of a trust. And I think that really helped us throughout the whole process. So we're still doing it now. But I would just say communicate as much as you can with the person that you're looking to, go into this with. And if you feel at the end of those conversations that kind of peace and like, the sense of, I think we could really do this, then that means something. And I kind of just like floated off that.
Yeah. And I would add, I think the biggest thing, I've learned for us is like, and I think it probably applies to a lot of couples and partners, is like, you need to learn to talk to that person in like language that makes sense to them. So like I am such like Sam said, like I just really, for one reason or another, my mind is always sort of high level, bigger picture. And I struggle, how we'll actually make it happen, but I can project and all that. And I think I would always go to Sam with those huge picture things. And this is what we're going to do. And it would just, shut her down because her mind doesn't work like that. And so it would, create fear and anxiety and all that. And then we would just get stuck and we wouldn't be able to move. So I think learning to just, speak to each other in a common ground has been, a huge thing that's helped us to keep us moving forward.
So I think the dynamic is literally the same between you two and my wife and I, because I always attribute it to like a bull in the china shop. Like I'll just go right through, and I see the other side, and I just go. And my wife's sitting there picking up all the little broken glass I put it back on the shelf.
Yeah.
And it's very similar because Nick, you and I, we hang around or we read or we listen to podcasts and really understand that this stuff is not only applicable, but you could really realize it. Common people like you and I can do this. But, not all the time do we actually know how to get there. And so I'm sure similar to you, like all the partners that I have in business are always the ones that are analytical, that are, the engineers. Like right now, my flipping partner, he's an engineer, right? He puts together all the systems. Like I can't do that. Like I get so frustrated trying to do all the minutia work. It's not how I work. And my wife's type A too, right? Like she wants to know all the details, and it's tough for me to communicate that way. But it is important to realize, so I like to highlight it here at the beginning before we get into your real story, because not only in business, I mean, in life and just marriage and things going forward, like you have to recognize those dynamics and then figure out a way how to like reverse engineer how you communicate, because the way I was communicating to her, she's like, I don't really care, about getting over there. Like I want to figure out how to get there. So we're very similar.
Yeah.
Hit the nail on the head. Absolutely.
So let's dig into that story. Nick, talk a little bit about the first deal, kind of the struggles of getting it. If you're like most of the people we interview, like there's a timeline. You probably made offers. You probably hit a lot of rejection. Talk a little bit through that first deal.
Yeah, so we were looking for our first multifamily, and we had set the plan, like we're not going to rent an expensive apartment, nor are we going to purchase like we wanted a value add property. We weren't going to buy anything turnkey. And so we were looking and looking and looking and offering on these value add multifamilies, having the most difficult time. And at one point we were out looking, and we were just kind of walking one of the neighborhoods, stumbled into a brand new 1-bed, 1-bath condo. And, within the 24 hours, we were under agreement on it, which is just the farthest thing from what we had wanted or what we had planned on. So we got under agreement on that, and then we basically we didn't understand why at the time. Like we were just like, we don't know what drew us to this condo.
The fact that it was in an up and coming neighborhood definitely was. So we were like, we have appreciation on our side. That was kind of what we kept saying. Yeah. Aside from the fact that it was brand new and shiny, and we were like, we get to live here, but we get to now.
Yeah. So we got under agreement on that, and we lived there for about 6 months. Mm-hmm. And the building we were in was basically it was a 6-unit building, 3 units on one side and 2 on the other, but it was joined.
3-story.
Yeah, 3-story. So our side was 3 condos, and the other side was a multifamily. So Sam had become really good friends with one of the neighbors who was the tenant of the building. And one day she was like, oh, so sad. Like, I'm going to be moving. The landlord, my landlord has to sell. They're moving to California. And Sam was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but could you put us in touch with your landlord?
So that was I guess the start of it. And Nick was, funny enough, on a business trip and gone. So I was just sitting here and I'm like, we just bought this condo 6 months prior. Like, can we even do this? But she put me in touch with her landlord. I started negotiating via text with him. Nick came home from his business trip, and we went, and actually the landlord was actually out of the country at the time. So he had a friend open up the house to us and show us the house. So we walked the floor plan, and I'm looking at Nick going like, oh yeah, this is it. Like I knew a second we walked in, the tenant had still lived on the first floor, and then he had a bi-level unit. So basically 3 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs, and then living, kitchen, bathroom downstairs. And I said to Nick, we turn it into the 3-family. We have, 3 condos on the other side. We can definitely do it. He's like, you're crazy. It's so small up here. I was like, we can definitely make this work. So then we basically went back and forth with negotiations. And then we were leaving the country on a planned trip to Italy. So we left for Italy. We started emailing back and forth and we did a couple counter offers, and we ended at 620 for the property, or 640?
630.
630. I was close. We ended at 630 purchase price, and he accepted our offer. But 2 days prior, Nick proposed in Italy. So we're on the train or whatever going home or getting to our next flight, and we literally just weren't speaking. Like, there was no word. I was like, dude, we have to pay for a wedding. Like, you didn't tell me that. How is this gonna work? So we got home. We got our apartment. So the conditions for financing at that point was getting our place rented, because we weren't selling our condo. So we got our place rented, moved out of our condo, moved everything into the basement of this house, and lived through a 7-month renovation while planning our wedding. And we moved out in like 3 weeks. It was a whirlwind, but that was the start.
That's awesome. You know, we had a very similar situation. We won't get into my story, but very, very similar. So let's sort of go into that place, the renovation. Walk us through what that looked like, hiring contractors, how you paid for it, even the financing on purchasing that place. I don't think you talked about what sort of loan you used.
Yeah, so we bought it FHA. We just paid the rehabs ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so basically what we did, like Sam said, we took it was a 2-family, but the owner had used 2 floors as a bi-level unit because he had a larger family. And so we sort of ran the numbers like both ways. Like, are we better off leaving it at 2, having a larger unit versus 3 smaller units? Figured out it was going to be significantly better for us to have the 3 units, the 3 smaller units. And so we did that. So we immediately began with the permitting process, the demolition process, all of that to basically separate, the units. And then we lived through it as well, which was, I wouldn't recommend it really again, but it was interesting.
And then from kind of renovation standpoint, we had no idea what we were doing. Nick's dad, who still to this day helps us, is in the union and he's a carpenter. So he definitely has some, great experience, but works like a normal job. So it was one of those things where he was kind of our guy, and he was telling us what to do, and we were YouTubing things, and we did a majority of the work ourselves. The only thing we really hired out was plumbing, electric, and that's basic, and tile. And since then I've learned to tile, so we don't need that anymore. So yeah, I mean, we had no idea permitting wise what to do. We applied for our permit. We're like, we can start demo, we'll apply for the permit and wait. After like 30 days, I was like, Nick, I don't think we have anything in the system. And we just did it all wrong. Everything was just incorrect. And it's funny now, but during the time it was like our whole world was gonna, shatter. And we learned a lot throughout the process. But I think living through it and doing the work yourselves, it was easier because there was no safe space to hang out. It was a full construction zone. We had we put up a wall and taped plastic to it, and that was like our bedroom, and basically all of our things were in there. And then if you went outside of the plastic wall, you'd have to put sneakers on or work boots because there was just holes in the floor to the next floor, nails, bad. So it was easy for us to just come home from work every day, because we were at that point working 9-to-5 jobs, both in the city, and just work on the house until midnight, because we were like, A, we want this done, and B, we literally have nothing else to do unless we just lay in bed and stare at each other. So that was helpful.
Yeah, well, like I said, our stories are very similar. My beautiful wife, when we met, I had this 4,000 square foot 4-unit, completely gutted to the studs, and I was sleeping on OSB with a little couple blankets. And she's like, yeah, you can't live like this. So she brought me some plastic to put up, and she brought me a blow up mattress. And so that was the origins. I'm sorry. So very similar. So that first deal, was that conventional financing?
No, so that we actually did FHA.
Okay. So you were able to do 2 FHAs. Walk through that. I know you're on the mortgage side. Speak to that sort of with back-to-back FHA.
So the condo we purchased conventionally, and then when we purchased the multifamily, that was what we did FHA. We did 5% down on that.
Okay, perfect.
And then we were able to do another FHA on our next house hack. We just had refinanced out of the current one. Basically what happened, we did so much rehab that, we pushed a ton of appreciation into it. We refinanced conventional within 6 or 7 months, and then we purchased again FHA after that.
Perfect. So walk through that after you got the condo rented out and you completed that renovation. Kind of talk to what your situations were number wise, and then what gave you the confidence to kind of say, all right, let's go for another one.
Yeah, so the condo itself, as we said, I mean, it wasn't a true investment at that point, when we purchased it. So we, on a good month with minimal repairs, again, it was brand new, we cash flow like $200. And if there's repairs, then obviously we're in trouble there. But the multifamily, so we put in, like we said, we got it for like 630. We put in about 80. While we were living there, we were living for free. Yeah. We now cash flow.
But we hadn't even touched the first, we did the renovation in two kind of ways, because that tenant was living on the bottom floor who kind of had told me about the building. She had stayed, we had let her stay for 2 years. She had lived there a really long time, and we were doing a huge renovation. It was nice to have her down there. Yeah. So she stayed for 2 years. We did the top two, so kind of converted those two units. We lived in one, rented one, and she was there, and we were still at that point living for free. And then we had kind of said, you have about 12 months to just find something that, because she knew we were going to renovate, and unfortunately it just wasn't going to be in her budget. So we said, just give us 30 days. Like, we want to make this as easy for you as possible. And it worked out perfectly. She found a great place that was in her budget. She's super happy. And then we were able to renovate. So we renovated that place. And then now Nick will say the full numbers of all 3 units renovated.
Well, yeah. So just by doing that renovation, and she was significantly under market, we increased that rent, like $1,100 per month. Actually, no. Yeah, $1,900 per month. And so now that building makes us anywhere from like $2,500 to $3,000 a month, depending on what's going on from month to month. But that's where we shake out. Usually it's about $2,800 a month.
Awesome. So let's go from there to the next deal. Like, at what point did you kind of get that mindset of, all right, now I got the confidence, let's go take on another one?
We kind of knew, like, once we started to wrap that up, we knew, like, okay, we got to get the next one. So we just started getting on the hunt, basically immediately once we started to wrap up that.
We got married first. We went on our honeymoon, and we're laying up by the pool, and Nick's looking up homes being like, what about this one? And I'm like, we never stop. So just putting that in there quick.
Yeah. So when we got back, right after that, basically, we got back, and within a couple weeks of being from getting married and being on our honeymoon, we got under contract on our next property, which was another kind of similar thing. And we've kind of learned, like, we always have these set plans and like set things, and things just never really seem to go that way. So like, we had this neighborhood that we're in now. This is South Boston. This is, one of the top 2 to 3 neighborhoods most expensive in the city of Boston, most desirable. It's all, 22 to 35 young professionals working in the city. And we just were like, we'll never find a property there. It's not even worth our time. Don't even consider it. Well, obviously we ended up finding the house in that neighborhood. So we found this house, and
on the MLS.
It was on the MLS, had been sitting for a really long time. They wanted, I think it was like $950 for a 2-family, and not a huge 2-family. And when we walked it, we were like, okay, let's at least see if there's any value add opportunity. We'll go check it out. Go down to the basement, and there's like 9-foot ceilings in the basement. So immediately we're like, okay,
sold.
Yeah, this is it. So within like a half hour after that, we went to grab a drink afterwards, and we were, we already submitted an offer. I mean, we knew right away, like, this is going to work. Submitted an offer, and then, by the end of the weekend, we had them cancel their open houses, and we were under agreement on it.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because value add, I think, a lot of people struggle right now in this market. It's hot, no matter where you are in the country. It can be challenging. Every deal I've done has been value add, and that comes from my background in flipping properties. Obviously, you're looking for, in this particular property, you got an additional unit. Second property you bought, you realize you get a second unit. Talk through like how you identify that, what the process is like that, how you maybe look at utilities, like how are you doing some of those sorts of things when you separate a unit for people that may also be wanting to try to identify value add properties.
As Nick mentioned.
What's up, everybody? Let's take a quick minute and talk about Rent Ready. Are you new to house hacking and wondering how you find tenants and collect rent? Especially while trying to maintain professional boundaries and a shared living space? Rent Ready can help you manage your house hack setup. For less than $9 a month, you can do it all. Fill rooms quickly with sites like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist with a free professionally designed listing page. Find high-quality tenants with TransUnion certified background checks, electronically send, signed, and store leases, and collect rent for the entire lease or set up month-to-month charges. For your tenants, they use RentReady's app to complete the application, sign their lease, and pay you rent. They can even submit maintenance requests from the app instead of knocking on your door. Even better, RentReady is unlimited, so you don't have to pay per unit or per tenant, just one flat price, which puts more money in your pocket. And speaking of putting more money in your pocket, RentReady has given our listeners a discount to get 50% off any RentReady plan when you sign up using our special code SUCCESS at rentredi.com. That's RENTREDI.com using code SUCCESS for 50% off any RentReady plan. All right, let's get back to the episode.
As Nick mentioned, both times that we went through it with the value add, so the first property was adding the other unit, and then this property, we realized the potential in the basement. We basically try to run numbers both ways. Like, if we leave it as is are we going to be okay? And then kind of like play with the extra space. So in this unit, specifically in the South Boston neighborhood, we had the footprint of the house is about, I'd say, 1,000 square feet on each level. So we had an extra 1,000 square feet, give or take, with the utilities kind of in a closet back there downstairs. So we're saying, do we want to add a third unit and, convert that? Or do we want to make that first unit a bi-level? So giving, 2 floors. And we ended up doing a bi-level unit for tenants, mainly because in this South Boston market, bedrooms rent for about $1,100 a bedroom. So we knew if we could add more bedrooms, and at the time it was only a 2-bed, 1-bath on each floor. If we could add more bedrooms and another bathroom, then we probably would be getting just as much rent, if not more, and we wouldn't need to separate utilities because it already is a 2-family. It would be less permitting because it's already a 2-family. So that's kind of how we made that decision. And I think it was definitely a good one. We ended up converting the first floor to be a 5-bed, 2-bath. So there's 3 bedrooms in the basement and a bathroom, which we added. And then upstairs, we had the 2 beds in the bath that we just had renovated, and that rents out for $6,000 a month, which completely covers our mortgage, and then we live upstairs.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think just on the big picture, I think the market's at a point where you're more often than not, you're not going to find a turnkey property that is going to cash flow, or at least at the metrics that we want. So it's just not an option. So we just try to, find opportunities. I think we're also at this point in a bit of a sweet spot. At least we always say, like, we are willing and able to take on more than your average homeowner or newer person in the investing space. But the projects we're looking at are also not the type of projects that the people at the next level, like the bigger investor or the developer, they don't have enough meat on the
attention on you.
So we've been trying to just seek out those types of opportunities.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's a very unique space. I think, the 2 to 4 units or value add, like you're talking about with single family townhomes, is a space where you don't have the big institutional players in on, because, as an agent, I work with a lot of commercial investors that are looking at commercial properties, and you're talking about hedge funds, you're talking about big institutional investors coming in on those properties. But when you're in the residential space, you don't necessarily have that. You're competing with local investors, but you have the ability to, very few are going to walk a property like you did and recognize the basement as a value add, because, that's maybe just not on their radar, and it's maybe a little bit larger a project. But being a homeowner, you have a unique opportunity to pull your own permits, do the majority of the work yourself, sort of doing it at a stage. Obviously we're preaching to the choir, talking about how much we love house hacking and the value add space, but I really want to touch on it because I do think adaptability is key in entrepreneurship, no matter what you're doing, specifically in real estate, because markets are cyclical, right? They're constantly changing. The market today was completely different than the market was a year ago, pre-COVID, in different ways. Some similarities, but very different, at least from my perspective. And it's just all about adapting to that. And value add right now is kind of a crucial element if you really want to, like you said, get the numbers you were seeking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's sort of creating your own deals, is really what I was getting at. To a large percent, especially when you're in a very competitive market where, I'm sure in South Boston, it's like a lot of markets around me where, you got a dozen offers within a certain time, on any property that's worth its salt, right? And so it can be challenging, but it's also doable.
Totally.
Yeah, no, we literally use that saying all the time. Like,
Create your deal.
yeah, because you're just, again, 9 out of 10 times, you're not just going to find it. It's not just going to show up. You gotta find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get into, I want to get into your careers, Nick, in the mortgage space and just kind of see the dynamic with that. But just touch on that a little further, the value add piece, because I don't want to breeze over that too quickly. I mean, I just think that's so crucial right now to everyone listening that, that is in this market, a lot of times what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to be a little bit creative. Touch a little bit further on that if you would.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's something we look for. And I think, I talk to a lot of investors or people looking to get started house hacking just with my job in the mortgage space. And, so I'm talking to a lot of newer people now. And of course, we're still pretty new too. But, they come to me and they're like, Nick, I want to do this house, but like, look at the numbers. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. They don't make sense. But like, one, you're looking for completely turnkey, or two, like, a lot of times, in our area, a lot of the multifamily homes have like the small kitchen, like a formal, like the old homes have the formal dining room and then the living room. And it's like, you can easily, like right off the bat, close up the dining room. No one needs a dining room for an apartment, and make that another bedroom. So it's like small things like that don't cost a lot of money, but most properties you can find a way to add the value to make the numbers work to what you need.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to touch on that because, most of the clients I work with, I mean, that's what we're kind of identifying. Like, how can we go in and value add? Because, if you're trying to get that cookie cutter, move-in ready, turnkey property, it's going to have a dozen offers with it, coming with it. If you're looking on MLS, if you're looking off market, it can be, it brings challenges. Most people are listing anyway, even if you come at them with off-market deals. So, value added is key. And, basement, ADUs, which we haven't necessarily touched on, but garages, secondary in-law suites, whatever that looks like. I mean, there's potential, with the amount of money, a lot of people are talking about, correction in the market. And, I totally understand. But at the same time, with the amount of money, as in the mortgage industry that is backing a lot of these loans, I find it hard to believe that we're going to, have, I mean, there's just a lot of upward pressure on it, and so it can be challenging. And so really, it doesn't really matter. My point is, it doesn't matter what happens, whether the market cracks or whether they continue to push it further up. There is potential in value add. And I think it takes a certain skill set. A lot of times it takes getting around the right people, right? Whether it's agents or other investors or meeting up, there's a lot of virtual meetups now where you can kind of create the mindset. And there's a lot of cool virtual things going on where, you can literally watch walkthroughs and while people are showing you, the value add. But I just wanted to highlight it because I think it's important. And I think a lot of people miss that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we couldn't agree more.
So let's go into the mortgage stuff. There's a lot of misconceptions. So let's address a little bit of that first, Nick. Like, talk a little bit through your perspective on these primary homeowners trying to buy multi-units or invest these type of investment properties, and some of maybe the misconceptions and some of the things people should be looking for.
Yeah. So I think for starters, right? I mean, a lot of times, I think the couple biggest things I see is one, you have the group of people that don't understand that, you can do low down payment. You can do FHA, and there's other programs. I mean, there's a lot of local state programs that you can do that are low down payment, even for 2 to 4 unit. So I think that's one of the big ones that I see a lot is just people, they want to get into the space, but they don't understand, how they can. I think another one, like to your point, and you as an agent probably see this too. I have a lot of people that are like, I think we're at the top of the market and I don't want to buy right now because what if, prices come down? And another thing, like I tell everyone, and we agree as well, like when we're buying, if the numbers make sense today, you're not looking to exit the property immediately. I mean, it's going to make sense in 5 years. It's going to make sense in 7 years, as long as you underwrite appropriately. From a rental standpoint, I don't believe there's ever a bad time to buy. So coupling that with the fact that we're never going to have interest rates, or at least I hope we don't have interest rates as long as we do now, isn't a better time to be buying, especially for these people that are getting 30-year fixed at 2.5, 2.7. I mean, it's unheard of. So it's a huge opportunity for buyers. And I think they have that concern that, what if the market corrects? And it's like, that's still okay. As long as you're not, again, if you're not looking to exit the property immediately, it's a great time.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I listen to a lot of that sort of rhetoric, and I'm fully aware that, things are detaching from reality to a certain extent. But I'll never forget, because my key, I think adaptability, again, we touched on it, is the most important key to a sustainable entrepreneur venture, no matter what you're doing. And I'll never forget, in 2014, I was doing this flip, and I love Robert Kiyosaki. He's one of my heroes. I've read every single one of his books, listened to every single one of his podcasts. But in 2014, he was screaming from the rooftops, that the market was going to crash. It was going to be bigger in 2008. And I was literally losing sleep. I was in the middle of this flip. It was a big renovation, and I'll never forget. I was losing an enormous amount of sleep about, like, man, I'm going to be holding the bag. Like, I'm not going to get any money out of this. Like, I was literally like freaking out internally. And I ended up getting through it. Of course, now we're here in 2021, and that being 7 years ago. And the market, even if we had a 30% correction like we had in 2008, right, it wouldn't even come close to the prices that were back in 2014. And I don't say that to say that we're, in another 7 years, we're going to double, the values necessarily, maybe not. But my point is that had I, there's always going to be people screaming on both sides that the market's going to, you look at like things like Bitcoin, people talking about it going to 400,000, like there's always going to be people talking about it's going extremely up or extremely down. And the key, I think, is just being adaptable to allowing yourself to do either. Whether it goes up, great, you're going to still find value add. If it goes down, great, you probably don't need to do as much value add. But being able to do both, and I think the component of house hacking is that no matter what the market's doing, you have the freedom to be able to adapt because you don't have a mortgage. You don't have this big anchor tying you down to something. You have the ability to adapt. So let's touch on, you talked a little bit about kind of the overview of mortgages. Let's talk like individuals. You talked about some in your state. I would love to hear about those low down payments, but some of the more traditional, like conventional financing, usually, if you correct me if I'm wrong, about 5% down is, sort of standard for a duplex. It can be challenging for 3 and 4 units. Correct me again if I'm wrong, but in my area, with conventional, it can be challenging. With 3 and 4, you generally have to bring higher down payment. FHA is usually a lot more, for if you want to get a 3 or 4 unit. I personally, did a 4 unit with FHA. It's a lot easier. You can do that 3%, 3.5% down. Here in Metro Detroit, we, USDA loan is a rural development. A lot of people think it's way out in the middle of nowhere. Well, there are pockets in Metro Detroit, not that far outside of Metro Detroit, where you can use that 0% down. It can be challenging, but you can get, duplexes. There are a lot of different loan programs. Just talk a little bit through each one, the pros and cons of each, and kind of how you look at each program.
So I think it always, for me at least, it always starts with the borrower and their situation, right? So we're never going to, I don't usually go into any conversation pushing a product. I think it's really important to understand like what the goal is of the buyer, what they're looking to do, and like what their goals are sort of long term. Because I think each program and the different programs are going to have different sort of pros and cons depending on what they're looking to do. So I tell everyone, the last thing I want to talk to people about is product, because we just need to figure out what their goals are, and we'll make it work. Like there's always going to be a way to make something work for them. Yeah. So from my standpoint, I always get people coming to me like, hey, well, can I do this program or can I do this program? How do I qualify for that? And it's like, let's take a step back. What are you trying to do? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do with the property? But yeah, I think for the most part in our area, in my area of Massachusetts, specifically Greater Boston, we're doing a ton of FHA, and I'll touch on why in a second, but we do a ton of FHA, and then we have a state program. It's a conventional loan called Mass Housing, which is income restricted. So a lot of states have it. It's to get more people into home ownership, but it has a lot of benefits that FHA does. Low down payment. They subsidize the mortgage insurance. So like my buyers that qualify, it's about half the cost of the mortgage insurance. So that would probably be my two biggest fits. We don't do, again, coming in our area, we don't have a lot of the single family investors. So most of mine are multifamily, just because that's what our neighborhood makeup is. We certainly do more USDA than you would expect, kind of what you're saying. We have some pockets too that aren't far from the city that people are like, what is this rural program? And I'm like, this suburb actually qualifies, and people are surprised by it. Yeah. So I think we do a lot of that. But the reason I think FHA, so we do a lot of FHA, and I think the benefits just outweigh the negatives, right? Everyone will come to me, and I'm sure you hear it all the time too. It's like, well, the mortgage insurance is so expensive and all that. And I'm like, again, in our area, they're buying $900,000, $1.1 million assets, 3.5% down. So you're getting into these properties for $40,000, $50,000, and now you own $1 million asset. like, would you trade that for the $600 a month you're paying in mortgage insurance to own $1 million asset for that? I mean, that's a really good return. So I think when you boil it down for people, like, it's easy to get caught up in the minutia of it. But if you're looking to grow your portfolio and you're looking to do it at a low down payment, there are going to be sacrifices or some negatives attached with it, but it's just making it work.
So what I like to, do with that particular, take on mortgage insurance, and I understand where it comes from. I'm a big fan of both, which is sort of odd, like Robert Kiyosaki and Dave Ramsey. I actually really enjoy just the philosophy of both of them, but they're polar opposites, right? And so I'm always somebody that's always right in the middle of both of those. So I understand where a perspective like that would come from mortgage insurance, because you're trying to save money. But I always give the perspective of, if you take a 40-year perspective on mortgage history, right, and you look at what our parents paid in the, say the 70s and 80s, where they had mid to upper teen interest rates. I mean, that's 10% the cost of the loan than we have. So you can see how much lower you could qualify for, right? As far as, so there's the first step. So you're paying massively more in interest rate, but then they still had to come up with 20% down. Oh, you can't get into these products for 20%. It's because that whole era you had to put 20% down, right? And so if you look at it in that perspective, and then you look at it soon that you're living for free, potentially cash flowing while you're living in some of these properties, it eliminates that. And it's, and if you look at what a traditional investor would have to come in with, because now my wife and I buy properties traditionally, 20-25% down, probably have to deal with balloon payments, all the things that, as in the commercial lending industry, and we can kind of touch on some of that, but like, it's such a, if you look at it from that perspective, it's a silly argument.
I sound like a broken record, and Sam probably hears me on the phone with everyone every day, but I'm like, it's a cost of doing business. I mean, now we're a similar thing. Like, we look at, 25% down program. And again, we're talking $1 million assets. So now, instead of $40,000 out of our pocket, now we got to come up with 200, 250, and that's, I mean, you can't even compare the two. So I would do anything to have, and again, work it into your numbers. Yeah, you have $600 in mortgage insurance. Okay. But it beats coming up with an additional $185,000 for a down payment.
And beyond that, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but like beyond that, when you're getting into primary residence, you pay the closing costs generally, which are taxes and insurance make up the bulk of the closing costs. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's roughly about 2/3, give or take, of the closing costs generally, and depending on the market. But if you're an investor, those taxes you're still paying the entire year, those are dramatically higher. And so I mean, just the whole, you're bringing a lot of money to close as an investor. And so, I just view PMI, as you said, cost of doing business, but a really low cost of doing business. And there are a lot of, if you do value add, like I did, I did a 203K, which is the extension of FHA, and dramatically increased the value. And so we ended up refinancing to conventional. But, there are ways, I mean, markets appreciate, especially if you're in good markets like, South Boston. And, that, to me, that's the least of your worries, if you're trying to attain something like you and I are.
Yeah. And another thing, like the closing costs are another interesting thing that comes up all the time. And I'm like, like what we do with some of our clients, like, okay, so, market interest rate, 2.5%, and you have about $9,000 or $10,000 in closing costs. So, in exchange for that, why don't we do a 2.875 interest rate? You don't bring any closing costs. We'll wipe it out with that. And you're already now getting an interest rate that was unattainable up until, COVID. And so you're still significantly ahead of the game. You got a 30-year fixed rate at 2.875, no closing costs. Like there's just so many benefits, especially being owner occupied, that it's like, when you have to take a step back, because it's easy to get hung up on, well, I have mortgage insurance or we have this, but to the things we just talked about, there are just so many benefits that outweigh it. And for people that are looking to build a portfolio, I mean, there's no better way to get started.
Yeah. And I think, at least for me, this has been a challenging year, and a lot of people, in just a lot of aspects, but being able to step back and looking at more of like a timeline of history, whether it's markets or not, just gives you some perspective, on and especially in the mortgage world, to where like, man, like we really are living in some unprecedented times to what they're allowing us to do. And so the cost of business is so small, and I totally understand, like I appreciate, where people are coming from with that. But I think this probably touches on a broad broader subject. It's just like becoming friends with Sam and Nick, if you're in Boston market, can kind of open you up to the broad, like, listen, yeah, we've paid this along the way too, but our end goal is this, yeah, we did some crazy things, we bought a house and got married, probably within the same year. Like there was some challenges, but it brings some confidence when you're able to, get in touch with someone in your market that has done it and can show you that perspective that, like, listen, $600 a month to buy $1 million product is a pretty low cost.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. Let's talk about maybe looking forward for the both of you. You have the 3 properties. What's sort of on the horizon? What are you looking toward in the future? And what are your goals? I mean, just in whether it's real estate or fire, or like what are your goals looking forward?
Yeah, so I mean, that's been a big thing. I think we both thought, 2020 is our year. This is when, we're going to keep expanding our portfolio. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And it really forced us to take a big step back. So prior to 2020, or at the beginning of 2020, Nick was like not in the mortgage space. I was working a marketing job that it was fine. And we were both kind of just like, what are we doing with our lives? And throughout 2020, he was able to transition his career. He's never been happier. I stopped my W-2 job and I'm focusing on real estate full time, which looks a little different than I think we thought it would look like. Cause I was like, I'm going to get a project. We're going to go into this. And we went from, both dual income to no income. And, we still had a project going on at the time that we did that. So we stepped back, we thought about kind of what we wanted. And now I think future, we're hoping to actually do our first flip because, we're talking about, to Nick's point, bringing all this cash down to build our rental portfolio. We want to generate it somewhere other than just working. We are doing our first flip. I'm in the process of trying to get my CSL license to be a general contractor because I personally really enjoy the construction aspect of all of this. It's funny how it worked out. Usually one person gravitates to one thing and the other, but Nick was really like headstrong on financing and I was like, let's tear down walls. This is awesome. So that's what I'm working on now and hopefully going to be able to, run my own projects, which would be awesome because up until now I've been doing it, but, not as legitimately as I want to be. And then from there, continue to build our rental portfolio as well.
Yeah. So I think, one step of that is Sam's going to we're going to start taking on some construction clients just because we're basically looking to fill a need. I mean, we get a lot of people asking us about it and she's incredibly talented and really into it. So she's going to kind of focus on that, which is super exciting for us. And I think we're also, we're going to look to keep growing our investment portfolio. And I think we're looking to just tackle some more like flip or development opportunities. Mm-hmm. So we're looking to do that basically because in the city where we are, we were really, really impacted by COVID from the rental market standpoint. I'm sure like a lot of people, a lot of areas, vacancy has gone up a ton. We were running at close to a 0 vacancy and, now it's double digit. So in prices on multis haven't been reflected with the new risk. So, we're kind of pausing a little bit, hoping like Q3 we'll probably be able to get into another multi, but trying to take on some flip projects for now because the suburbs are scorching hot. So we're really working on trying to get into those markets.
For sure. It's something that, I think if one aspect of what we touched on earlier that might be the multifamily, because, I do see a lot of landlords that, have gotten hurt during this whole timeline and they still, they're still able to get, what they want. And, it's a little bit detached from what you would think, but I do think that might be an aspect that might see a little bit. And I've already, seen some of that and we bought some properties during, just in the past month here that were the cause of that. So let's talk about that is a lot of fun. I come from a contracting family, so it's a lot of fun. We just, we'll be closing Tuesday on the next flip here. So it's a lot of fun. Talk about that process of getting your license and kind of, you touched on a little bit, but what are you most excited for about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the license is overwhelming at this point. I have done all my steps and I'm waiting to get my test date. So I'm like, God, please make it be at least 4 weeks so I can drown myself in studying. But it's exciting. I feel like, just personally, I started out mindset of leaving college of I'm going to be the best employee ever. And then I was in these jobs and I never really felt I never felt the fire. I was doing what I wanted or what I was meant to do. And then we started doing these projects and I just found myself obviously just sitting at my desk at my day day job, like sketching floor plans and sending it to the architect. He's like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't your job. I'm like, I know, I just love it. And I think I kind of found my place. And, throughout 2020, like I said, there was just so much reflecting. And Nick was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to like go into homes and tear them apart and put them back together. And that's all I know. Like, that's what brings me joy. So of course, Nick's the like, you can do anything you set your mind to, and I'm the cautious one. So I pushed it off for a really long time. And I think now I'm finally starting to come around to it, just like, 10 years ago when I was saying, okay, fine, we'll be landlords. Same process, truly. And I think the idea of being able to kind of do what we've done on a larger scale for clients and then for ourselves, it just opens up kind of a world of possibilities. And I think truthfully, it kind of gives me my purpose back of like, I left my job because I knew there was something that I wanted to do that like I wasn't doing. But I think the chaos of COVID, the transition of Nick switching his job kind of put everything on pause. And I was just kind of in a daze for a while, like where am I? So I'm finally feeling like we're back on track, and there's definitely no better feeling.
And I don't know if I'm certain that you feel the same way, but without house hacking, without the element of house hacking, there's no way I could leave my corporate job. And it's probably similar. You guys probably could not have changed careers, both of you in the same year without that element. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
No
that's
way. It truly is life changing. I mean, again, like we talk about it with people a lot, and we were both making really, really good incomes and incredibly stable and all that. And the fact that we were both able to walk away from it, and sure, was it scary, and was it the same that we were, was it the same level when we left? No, of course there was a step back, but just the fact that we were able to do it and still be completely comfortable and all of that, it just would never have been an option without the steps we took with house hacking.
And it's sort of, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about like the cost of hesitation. And, there is such a cost of hesitation, especially in this industry. And I don't know, I don't think about it enough, but, I'm able to make snap decisions, because of it. And I just, obviously we're preaching to the choir here. We both are in agreement, but it really is so crucial, that element of being able to, not move like a ship, but move more like a little, you're able to maneuver, be adaptable, which isn't possible for almost everyone I know at my job with one of the top companies in the country, that all make high incomes, but they're weighted down with, home debt, car loans, credit card debt, all of these things that they literally can't maneuver because they have such a burden on them. And that's just what house hacking brings.
Yeah. And I think, even like the whole community and all of that, like I think everyone we meet through the social media channels and all that, it gives you that sense of like, you are doing the right things. Because I think it's easy with friends and all that who maybe aren't doing the same things. Like you start to feel like a little, like, are we doing the right thing? Like when we were living in basements or construction zones, like we share like a old used car, like just all of those things. But then, when we're sitting there like talking about change it and like making such huge changes, like it was refreshing to not need to kind of be like, well, how are we going to pay the mortgage or how are we going to pay this? Like that part was okay. It was now just like, how are we going to figure it out type of thing.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. About a couple years ago, I used to tell all my friends at my job, oh man, like you should house hack, or like I'm doing this or that. And I learned a long time ago, I don't even tell them, it's they're like, you're an idiot. Why are you living with a tenant? I'm like, all right, fine. So yeah, it is challenging. And that's where this community is so important, and that's why we love having you guys on, because it's just so it's reinforcement, that I'm on the right way. You talked about having an old beater car. I mean, I had some nice vehicles when I was younger, so I thought that was what it was. I went cold turkey. I sold them all. I got this beater Cobalt. It ended up rusting out during the process. I had it for like 5 years. It had like 200 and something thousand miles on it. My wife, I don't know why she decided to marry me, but I was driving that thing and she finally convinced me to get a new car. But like, it was just, I just knew I was on the right path. I knew I had to do something dramatic. And I knew that, I had no idea I didn't even know multi-units existed. I had no idea, but I knew that it was out there, and that's where this community is so important. I mean, and so we really appreciate you coming on. What are some things that kind of helped you mentally, whatever that looks like, develop what it will take to change careers, get into house hacking, and make it sustainable, because I'm certain that as many as I do, people that set out to do something, and then a couple months later, a year later, they're doing something completely different, right? And that's just like a cycle for them in their life. So what were those things?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think for me, I never struggled with the drive or the motivation or anything like that. That was just all sort of within me. I think my biggest struggle has always been, what will people think type of thing. And just from probably like, a self-esteem type of thing, I always struggled with that. And, I think it was important. Like I do a lot, like I am now like a fan of like Gary Vee and all of that. And try to just build up, like I sort of just build up the callus of, putting myself out there. Now I do that regularly, which is people ask me now, they're like, how the heck do you do this? Like, and I'm like, at one point I couldn't do it, but I think I realized like, I trained my mind, like the things I'm doing are truly to help people and I care so much about it. And then like, once you start to see that like people benefit from it, is huge and rewarding. So I think like, that's always been my struggle, being vulnerable publicly type of thing. Yeah. But again, I think once you start to see that, like, even if it's one person that, no one knows about, like just being able to like give them some good advice or get them on a good track is worth it 10 times over.
To touch on that, we'll do a challenge to each other. About a year ago, this time was when I got rid of that beater. You should we'll exchange numbers after this. You should send us the picture of your old beater, and we'll post it because I think it's important. I think it's important in a world that so many people are like us. So many people maybe have they're around an environment like all three of us were in kind of our jobs and just society, right? And there's you're supposed to do certain things. Especially you guys got married. We got married. Like there were certain steps you're supposed to take. You're supposed to go get, that house, in the right area, and you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. And going countercurrent is really, really, really challenging. And so we should do that today. It'll be good for everyone out there that maybe is struggling like us three were, and my wife were, several years ago.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I was going to say back to, books, podcasts, things like that. Nick's definitely the guy that listens and reads and then passes them to me when he's like, I know that this will, resonate with you. But to the point of Gary Vee, I think I like that too. And there might be people out there like me of sometimes I'm like, if it's information overload, I think I'm so type A that sometimes I spiral, which is why it's helpful that Nick's like, okay, you're going to like this, read this, or you're going to enjoy this, listen to this podcast instead of doing too much information at once because I just will go down a black hole. And I like the digestible chunks that I get on like Instagram from Gary Vee. And I also think, we started our joint account, which is how we found you about a year ago, and seeing other people doing and succeeding in what we wanted to do helped me feel motivated and feel like we're on the right track because it felt, more personal. Like, look, these people are, and same thing with you, you're just over in this market doing the same exact thing and it's working out. So hearing stories that are similar, especially when we were really starting out, like that first project, living through that construction zone, we weren't networking. We didn't have our account. We literally felt like we were on an island of like just debris and there was no way out. But I mean, we pushed through and thank God we had each other. But and then the difference, obviously there's, that kind of faith that we built up in ourselves doing the second house hack, like, okay, or third, we could do this. But and then the difference I felt with having that community around me that second time posting, the terrible things that would happen throughout the renovation that we ran into on Instagram and having people be like, same thing. You guys can do it. I think it's underrated of how much it actually lifts you up. So that was like a huge game changer for us for sure. So I would say if you're starting out, just immerse yourself. And I know it sounds so corny, but like create an account, do something, figure out a way to connect with people because it definitely changes the game.
I couldn't agree more. Hopefully we continue to collaborate because you have an amazing story. And literally, a year and a half ago, Drew and I, we're like, we don't really know that many people. Like there's maybe a handful of people we know that kind of do this, but they're not really as passionate as we are. Like maybe we can find a couple people just around us in Michigan. So like, let's just start talking about it. And he had, he's in the IT industry. So he had all these ideas. I'm like, whatever, like, I'm game for it. And it's amazing, like how many friends like you we've developed around the country. And it's just unfathomable because literally all we wanted to do was just connect and build our own self-confidence in it, and these conversations that we're having right now not only build each other up between ourselves, but now we have other people that, we get DMs, daily, just with questions, and people with, they're like, man, like I thought I want to do this, but like, what if people, like we get people that are like, people are going to think I'm weird, and, like just all kinds of things. And it's self-reinforcement. They're like, man, like you give us a lot of confidence, and it was nothing we ever intended to do, never set out to really do anything. We just wanted to find people that were similar in our state. We never even thought we could, develop relationships around the country and around the world, but there are a lot of people, and we really like highlighting it now, and never thought it was possible. And so the same thing that you're talking about.
So awesome, for sure.
Let's talk about real estate, like books, podcasts. I know you're not necessarily as many books and podcasts, but like what are some inspirations you draw from on the real estate side?
Yeah, so I listen to Bigger Pockets podcast, obviously. We have a local one that I'll plug, Real Estate Addicts, which is it's sort of hyper local, but we've got a lot of value out of it. We do Best Ever podcast with Joe Fearless. That's probably it from the podcast side, right?
Yeah,
I don't want to leave anyone out.
I know. There's a lot, but yeah, I think those are kind of the mains. And then honestly, people just like swipe up to listen, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm listening to. And we're like, okay, sure. Nick puts it on in the background. We share an office, so things are just kind of playing.
Yeah, and then from a book standpoint, I've been trying to switch. I used to do all hyper real estate. Now I've been trying to do more just like business mindset stuff. So I'm really trying to focus on that. I think I spent so much time trying to figure out like so much tactical stuff with real estate. And I think as I've gone through it and I realize more, it's like, I don't need, I don't need to have this such specific skill set. Like I really need to focus on my mindset and like business acumen and those types of things, because the rest, you can always figure out or find someone who's an expert at it. But, thinking sort of bigger picture has been sort of my focus lately.
No, I'm almost the same way. I spend a lot of my days in real estate law and contract law, for developing that side of things. But I almost, not that I intentionally do it, but I listen to a lot less real estate and a lot more things that I draw so much inspiration for real estate, and so, yeah, it's sort of it's a step process. You have to go hyper niche, and then all of a sudden you start drawing inspirations from things totally unrelated. And so I totally get that and understand that. So last question, talk a little about where people can find you. Your story is amazing. I know a lot of people are going to draw inspiration like I have. Where can people find out more about you, reach out to you, sort of just follow along in your journey?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram. Our handle is @Renos in Real Estate. And we are on it. My social media consumption was a lot in 2020. So 2021, I'm trying to limit it. But we're on it every day, checking our DMs. We love connecting with people. And we've really kind of built a little community. And it feels great, as I said before. So definitely follow us. We love to chat. And yeah, we're really enjoying that.
Yeah, and I do mine. I've recently focused on mine. Mine's Nick_Riccio, RICCIO_. My page is mainly mortgage driven. I do talk house hack, but a lot of just mortgage financing specific stuff.
Perfect. Well, we genuinely appreciate you both coming on and sharing your story. We'll have to have you back on again and sort of go, maybe even more hyper niche into the mortgage side of things. People may enjoy that, but we really enjoy the overview, because I think stories, like you said earlier, Sam, like a lot of the, it is challenging sometimes to go hyper niche. Like you're talking about numbers and in the weeds on a lot of different things, but stories have a way of relating, and I think all three of us got, vulnerable here. Like we talked about a lot of our struggles. I think that's really, really important, because no one, I don't know about no one, but very few people actually do that, and I know I got super frustrated with, how many people were talking about the fluff stuff, like the pie in the sky, like making 100 million, or like, I'm exaggerating, but I wanted to hear all the vulnerabilities I was having, and I think that's important. So we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
No doubt, man. All right, you guys have a good one.
You too.